coming to this panel on tropes, which can be described in many different ways. I heard someone describe it as the emotional linchpin of a story, which I thought was a beautiful way of saying it. So I'm just going to quickly go round and you can all introduce yourself to our viewers. Can we start with Jay?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jay. As you can probably hear, I'm German. I write romances between women and in pretty much all of the subgenres you can imagine. And my 21st romance novel will be out at the beginning actually of September.
21? Goodness, do you sleep?
Yeah, I'm just old.
She's not. Right, shall we go on to Angela?
Sure. Hi, I'm Angela. I write as A.L. Brooks. I've just sent the proofread copy of my 10th novel off to my publisher, so I'm halfway a J. And I write erotica and romances with a little bit of sizzle.
Very nice, very nice. Robyn.
Hi, I'm Robyn Nyx, and I write all sorts of different genres, always with a romantic subtext under there. I'm just working on my 7th novel at the moment, so yes, it's all good fun. I'm a third of a J.
I think we should all be measuring ourselves in how many J's we are. I think that's like the benchmark to be reaching for. Okay, and I think our smallest J is MA Binfield.
I was worried about the fractions I'm going to have to do. I'm Michelle. I write as MA Binfield, and I have one published book, another due to be published in December. So I think that makes me a 10th or a 20th of a J. I'm not quite sure. But I write romances, loving women romances, contemporary. So yeah, 2 books. I'm a baby, if not in years, but in books.
Yeah. But you know, you've got time. You've got time to catch up. Okay, so we're talking about tropes, and we're talking about basically what are our favourite tropes to write, which tropes sell well, which do we try and avoid, which do we like to read. So we're going to go through some questions here. We also have questions coming in on the Facebook Live. Already are we having great comments about A.L. Brooks' t-shirt, winning the t-shirt game straight in. We're going to the first question, and what is your favourite trope to write? Robyn, can we start with you?
Oh gosh, I think it's the hero trope, which I know sort of crosses over into the protagonist kind of thing, but I just think the heroic ideal is something I really like to put into my books, but still have them as realistic and believable for the most part, apart from in my kind of sci-fi trilogy where it was just like, is this person for real?
We're sci-fi. We're meant to be a little bit, a little bit unique. Michelle, what's your favourite trope to write?
I think I'm not as experienced as we've said, but I like friends to lovers to write. I think that's what I've gravitated to for the 3 books that I've written so far. I think there's something about, for me, people in close proximity that have a different relationship, finding out they've got those kind of feelings and the sort of tension, the romantic and sexual tension. So I like that in a book. I like to read that in a book. I like to write that in a book too, yeah.
Fantastic. Angela, what about you?
Well, it's funny because when I got this question, I was like, I don't have a favourite trope because I don't write tropes. I don't think I do. And then I looked at my bookshelf of my books and went, oh. So I've realised, it seems, because I'm now writing another one, that I quite like writing enemies to lovers, because I've written 2, I've got 1 more coming out in November, and I'm now writing another one. So subconsciously, it seems I like doing enemies to lovers. But I also like doing coming out trope. Calling it toaster oven, and I won't call it that, but I like exploring. It's something we've all been through in one way, shape or form. So I love exploring all of those feelings that are involved in actually realising that your sexuality is not hetero. Because that's just absolutely life-changing for everybody. No matter which part of the rainbow you then fall under, So I just find that really interesting.
Excellent. That's really interesting. It's really interesting that you didn't actually think that you were writing tropes and then, who knew?
Exactly.
So Jay, what about you? What's your favourite trope?
I would say what most of my books have in common is that 90 or 95% of them are slow burn romances, which means that my characters don't fall in love at first sight and they don't jump into bed on page 2. They usually take their time getting to know each other and building the relationship. So I really much enjoy that, and I think that's what I'm best known for.
Yeah.
Very good at.
Very, very good at. I saw a comment someone directed at you on Twitter, I think it was yesterday, where they said it was 200 and something odd pages, and then they kissed, and I was like, that's a
and I think it was like a kiss on the cheek on page 200.
Yes, it was a kiss on the cheek, you're
like
right,
that. Yeah, that was Damage Control, probably the most slow burn of slow burns. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Okay, so next question we have is, are there any tropes that you would like to write, but you don't feel they would work very well, or you don't think they'd sell very well, or there's some kind of reason that you avoid writing that trope? And can we start with Angela?
Yeah, this one's a difficult one because I know this is really unpopular, so I won't write it because no one will buy it. But I would love to write something that isn't necessarily a happily ever after. Mm-hmm. I know, I said it out loud, but you know, it's just not popular. Everybody, and I get it at the moment, especially with the way the world is, everybody wants a happy ever after. They want them riding off in the sunset together, end of. But I have read some really beautiful non-happy ever after books, and I'd love to write one myself, but no one will buy it. No one wants to read that right now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because there are certain I was talking with Julie Cohen, as I said, and she talked about entering into a contract with a reader, and one of those sort of contractual elements is that happy ever after. But I've read some great books where they've not had that, and you kind of think, I'd like to, but then who would buy it?
Exactly.
Robyn, how about you?
I think the one I avoid and don't like is Gay for You. I've got a real issue with that because, I mean, it's okay if it's a happy ever after, but there's always that thing about, I don't find it realistic, and I don't think it does us as a community justice to think that, you know, somebody can just be gay for that one person. It to me, it not belittles, but maybe demeans our identities in a way. So I stay away from that if I open a book and that's what it becomes, or, you know, if I haven't read the blurb and I just started to read it, or if I read the blurb and it's, you know, Gay for You is a straight person in a relationship. So I just that's one I'm not particularly keen on. I do realise, you know, that people are often in straight relationships and then realise their sexuality, but I think there's a fine line between the two of those things and doing it right. And I think it's often, unless it's own voice can tend to do it better than non-own voice, if that makes sense, because it's kind of people outside the community saying, oh, I think this would be cool to do.
Yeah, no, good point. Michelle, any tropes you'd like to write but you don't think they'd work or sell?
I mean, I'm still terrified by Angela suggesting no happy ever afters. I'm still trembling a bit. I think not really. I think characters sometimes can be very complex, and sometimes I've done things in the past that maybe they wouldn't be proud of, and I'm sometimes kind of tempted to write that more fully, but I understand that would mean that the characters, you know, not everybody would pull for them when they read the book, and it's really important that your main characters don't have all those blemishes. So I think that was something that I learned. Certainly the first draft of the first book that I wrote was full of that, and it was a real eye-opener for me to understand that people don't particularly want to read that or have a really flawed main character. But I think I see flaws in people a lot. I mean, it's like life, isn't it? We've all got flaws, but I know to avoid it, and I don't think I'd want to read it either. So it's sort of a weird thing. It's a bit like the happy ever after. I wouldn't want to read it. Affinity is my favourite Sarah Waters book, but it's a dreadfully sad, awful book, and it scarred me. I much prefer her happy endings. But yeah, so that, I suppose. just I don't know if that's a trope, but that sense that people might have cheated in the past or might have done something that doesn't make them a perfect person.
Yeah.
Not many of us are, I don't think. Yeah.
True, very true. And Jay, any trope that you'd like to avoid because you don't think it would sell or wouldn't do too well for yourself?
I first wanted to say something to what A.L. Brooks said about happy endings, and I think that trope can work, but not in romance, because if it doesn't have a happy after, it's not a romance by definition. So if you want to write that, you could, but not, and then you couldn't sell it as a romance. Yeah, as for my own answer, there isn't really a trope that I think couldn't work, because by definition, a trope is a commonly used plot scenario. So it means it can work. The question is just, can you make it work? And so pretty much anything I would want to write, I would trust myself that I could write it, and also find enough readers who are interested in it. But of course, there are tropes and maybe subgenres of romance that are less popular than others and sell less copies than others. For example, paranormal or historical romance sells less than contemporary romance. But at this point in my career, if my muse takes me in that direction, and I'm going in that direction, and I know there will always be readers who are interested in these books.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a different question, isn't it, when you have an established audience who are more willing to take a journey with you than if you're sort of starting out and people don't necessarily know what they're getting, especially if they've picked up, as you say, especially if they've picked up a book from a romance chart, then they are expecting a certain kind of book.
Yeah.
Okay. Has there been a time when you've been writing a certain trope but changed your mind during the story and maybe gone in a different direction? Shall we start with Michelle this time?
I can't think of one, actually. I think because I'm kind of new at it, I don't think I really understand tropes or don't think of them very much. I think I only understood the tropes that I'm writing when I had to come to tag the book at the end.
Yeah.
And it has all those tags, and I was like, oh yeah, that is a second chance romance where friends go to lovers. But I think as I'm writing it, I don't think I understood what I was trying to avoid or what I was trying to write or not write. So I don't think so. I mean, I just don't think I've got the sort of books under my belt in a way to say, oh yeah, on my 11th book, I almost did this and not that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's really fascinating. So Angela's admitted, and you've just admitted that at the start of your career, and even with Angela up until now, you didn't really realise you wrote tropes. So I'm really let's just pause that question a sec. Robyn and Jay, did you realise you were writing tropes when you started writing, or did you sort of progress along the way and then realise you were writing tropes? Can we start with Robyn on that?
Sure. I think when I wrote my first novel, I was completely ignorant to everything: the tropes, the rules, the point of view switches, how many characters you were supposed to have in. I was like Game of Thrones kind of novel with 10 characters in, and it was supposed to be a lesbian. You know, my main protagonists were lesbian, but I had straight sex in there, and I had all sorts of stuff on, and I now know that you're not supposed to do that in a lesbic romance, or your readers aren't going to be happy. So when I started off, now completely ignorant, but was lucky enough to get picked up after rewriting that. Well, as my editor at the time said, basically tore down the house but kept 2 of the people that lived there. So, well, not the house, it was kind of a block of flats with sort of 20 people there, and it was like, which 2 do you want to keep? I was like, oh, that's like asking for who your favourite child is. So at the beginning, no, didn't know, and it was a learning curve, and then attending writing classes, obviously reading lots of stuff, reading other books, and seeing what other people did, and what other people didn't do. But learning that very quickly in order to progress and make the next book better and the next book even better.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How about you, Jay? Did you know you were writing tropes to start with, or did that sort of come later? No,
I think for most writers, realistically, when we are starting out, we don't know anything about writing, or not that much, and we don't consciously think about tropes, even if we maybe heard of them. It only occurred to me years later. I published my first book in 2007, Backwards to Oregon, and then we were talking about fake relationship tropes, and someone was like, "Oh, you have written a lot of them," and I'm like, "Really? No, it's just one." And then she's like, "Yeah, backwards story," and I'm like, "Oh, she's right. It's fake romance." So yeah, but it didn't occur to me to name it that. So no.
That's really interesting how we don't really consider that until we get later on in our career. And I think that's more when readers come back to us, or when we see reviewers talking about our books and they say this is like a, you know, Ice Queen second chance, enemies to lovers, and we go, is it? Yeah, it is. Anyway, so that was a tangent. So back to the question: is there any time that you were starting to write a story with a certain trope in mind but changed your mind during the story? So Michelle's answered that. Can we go to Angela?
Yeah, it was kind of, there was one actually, and it was a kind of joint decision between me and my publisher, because I got a first draft done. It was actually going to be a paranormal romance. And I got the first draft done, and I quite liked it, but I wasn't entirely sure. And my publisher read it and went, "Nah, that's not gonna fly. It's just too unbelievable. You know, it stretched the realms of what was supposed to be possible." So went back and rewrote it as just a straight romance. The main character was supposed to have 2 guardian angels that sat on her shoulders and advised her through her life. And it was kind of kind of cute, but it was just, there wasn't enough in the story to really sell it that way. So we turned it into a contemporary romance, and it did fine. So yeah.
But now everyone's going to want the other one.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Keep your first drafts. Robyn, how about you? Have you ever changed your mind on a trope halfway through writing a book?
No, because I'm pretty much of a planner now, and work out kind of what's going to happen, who's going to be doing what, the tropes that are in there. I started Uncharted thinking enemies to lovers, but it was friends to enemies to friends to lovers, which I don't think is a trope, but now I've written a book like it. Yeah, now it is. But I really enjoyed writing that one. It was the first time that I'd written an enemies to lovers one, but I really enjoyed the banter between the 2 main characters, and that, you know, fizzing sort of bubbling attraction that was running underneath it, and digging really deep into that by writing it as a 2 POV book. So yeah. So yes, no.
Yeah, yes, no. Of course. The true writer's answer. Okay, so Jay, anytime you were writing one trope and then decided to switch halfway?
No, I'm like Robyn, I'm a planner, so I have my outline, and if something isn't working, I realize in the outline stage, which saves a lot of time. And of course, I always deviate from the outline while I'm writing, and sometimes it takes twists and turns that I didn't expect, but it never changes so much that suddenly I'm writing a completely different trope.
Interesting, yes. Just show of hands, who's the planners here? And who's okay, planner, and who's the pantser? Oh, I'm just not sure.
I'm a half.
What now, does that mean you plan half of it, or half the time you plan?
No, I have, like, literally, they'll meet here, just later this will happen, and at the end then this is it, and then in between I just kind of mishmash it. It gets to those 3 points. Yeah,
it's sort of a plan. How about you, Michelle? Are you a planner?
Yeah, I think probably not. I mean, I've learned to be, because I write faster that way. Otherwise, it's just too meandering and it just takes too long. I'm guessing that's why I've got so few books and Jay's got so many. Maybe there's something to be said for planning. But no, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, they're character-driven books for me, so I know the characters super well. I don't always quite know what they're going to do. But yeah. I'm working on being more of a planner. Yeah, that's true.
Interesting. Cool.
Sorry.
Right, okay, so next question. Is there a particular trope that you would personally like to read? And if so, do you also write it? So let's start with Michelle.
I mean, the ones, I suppose I really like the fake relationship ones. I don't know what that's about. I haven't really analysed that for myself. I've never written one, but I like them a lot. It's not quite the question, but kind of. I mean, I might like to try writing that one time. I think the tension and the putting people together in situations, and yeah, I think that would be really nice to write. Yeah, and I can't write a kind of small town romance, you know, like the Missouri Vaughan type books where there's a sort of vulnerable butch who was successful and now makes sculptures in their garage in a small town. Because I don't know small towns, I've only ever lived in cities, and I find it really hard to write that believably, I think. But I like that as a trope a lot too. Yeah. But I don't think I would write it. Yeah.
More one for you to enjoy reading.
Yeah, then just wait for other people to write them and then read them. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I know what you mean. Angela, how about you? What kind of tropes do you like to read, and do you try to write your own versions?
Kind of. I have two favourite tropes, which is fake romance, fake relationship. Love those. And I'm kind of just written one, but not quite how you might expect. But I love celebrity romances as well, and had huge fun writing my own one of those. Write your own script. I just loved writing that because I was like living my best trope. So I was just so excited from page 1 to page 243 or whatever it is. I just loved it. So yeah, it's good. But they're my two favourites. I mean, anytime someone says celebrity romance, I'm like, where?
Yeah. Okay, Robyn, how about you? What's your favourite trope to read, and do you write that?
I don't think I've got a favourite trope to read. I'm very eclectic in my kind of taste, so I just like to read all sorts of things. I'm having a go at doing a coming home, as Michelle said, kind of that coming home to a small town. So you've left the small town, you've gone to the big city, you've become successful, but then something's happened to take you back with your tail between your legs and then readjust into small town life again. So that's one is on the slate to write once I've finished the one that I'm working on, and I think that's a really good one to work with. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Excellent. And Jay, how about you? What tropes do you enjoy reading?
I enjoy really a broad variety of different tropes. That's what I read and what I write. Luckily, otherwise it would get really boring. Yeah, basically they all are slow burns with one or two exceptions maybe. Like AL and Michelle, I also enjoy fake relationship romances. I enjoy them more than I thought. Apparently I write them a lot. I think for me, the fake relationships, what I enjoy about them is this gradual progression from just pretending to have feelings for each other to gradually they are becoming aware of maybe the feelings aren't as fake as they thought. So yeah, I enjoy that a lot.
Excellent.
I wanted to say, sorry, on celebrity romances, I never even thought of that as a genre, but yeah, I would love that too. The book that I wrote, I look like someone who enjoys girl bands. I know a lot, but I do. I wrote a girl band romance, which is the book that I'm just finishing up now that comes out in December. And I got so excited writing that book. Too excited, you could say. But yeah, so that's a genre I never thought of, but celebrity romances, yeah, I would definitely go for that. Yeah.
I think we definitely have our own tropes and genres within Lesfic. There's like, you know, you especially find out when you start reading reviews, and especially professional reviewers, when they start trying to talk to other or to their review group, and they're talking about, oh, I'm going to like quickly encapsulate this book for you, and they use like 5 words and they're all tropes to describe one book, and you go, oh yeah. And that's so Lesfic. And also you're so like, and I want to read it now, like so it's like, thank you for that. Like it's a really good way to boil it down, but we're definitely quite unique in that, because sort of you don't really get that in mainstream. You're not walking into Waterstones and seeing like, you know, celebrity romance, enemies to lovers, you know, but you should, because I think we'd all be buying a lot more. Okay, our next question is, do you feel that tropes make books predictable? So if you're obviously going to be writing a you know, second chance romance, does that kind of give the book away a little bit? Shall we start with Robyn?
Okay. I think that the problem is there are no new stories, basically. Tropes are present in our books. They're the building blocks of a manuscript, and you can't get away from that. And I don't think you should try to, because as you said, Amanda, there are expectations when somebody picks up a book. If they pick up a Lesfic romance, and the back of it implies that there's an enemies to lovers situation going on, then that's what you have to deliver on. how you make it not predictable are the characters with which you inhabit the book. So every character you make, if you make them a living, breathing, four-dimensional character, rather than just somebody that sort of inhabits that story and is not deep, you don't go very deep, you don't dig deep emotionally, then you're not going to have a very successful experience. And I think you don't enjoy that, writing that, as well as expecting somebody to read it. And I think, you know, Michelle, how you said you were writing the girl band book and you absolutely loved it. I think that's fantastic. And that's what you should be doing as a writer, really, because writing is hard. And it's a thankless task. You put hours and hours and hours into doing it, and you sit there by yourself the whole time doing it, unless you're lucky, like Amanda and I, to have partner writers. So I think it's really important that you're enjoying what you're writing as well. But I digress. And I've forgotten slightly what the question was.
The question is, do you feel that tropes make books predictable?
Right. Yeah. So going back to it, it's about making your characters completely different. So how do you turn them into somebody that makes that trope interesting?
Very good and very true. Angela, what do you think? Do tropes make a predictable book?
No, I'm going to go with what Robyn said. It's all about the characters. I mean, like you said, every book fits a trope, and they always have. I mean, Jane Eyre is the classic enemies to lovers romance, yeah, and that's 200 years ago. So, but yeah, characterization is the key thing. What makes it predictable, and I found this recently, very recently actually, I read 2 books back to back by the same author, and they were virtually the same story. They just changed the character names, the city, virtually the same story, and I was like, I just felt cheated. Because I was like, seriously? That's what you did? You took your first book and just changed the character? That's when then I'm bored, because it's like, no, there was no effort put into this to make these characters any different from the other book that I read. So yeah, like Robyn said, get the characters right. I don't care if it's the 6th fake romance book I've read this month. If they're completely believable characters in their situation, I'm going to be in it. I'm happy. So,
yeah, very true. Jay, how about you?
I think the same. Basically, the tropes are just a tool. They are like a very generic and general framework that can act as a guideline. It's like a construction company or an architect. They have like a floor plan, and that floor plan says, okay, if you build a building, it better has a door, several windows, a roof, and a floor. And if you build 100 different houses and they all have these common elements, you still end up with 100 very different buildings. No 2 will look alike or feel alike. At least if you put some heart into it, you know, it's not just, you're not just doing it for the money. But within that general framework, authors are free to put their own unique spin on it. And I think that's what we need to do. And I agree with what Robyn said. The way to do that is to make the characters unique and their specific situations unique, and the setting needs to be different, and so that we are not just writing the same story again and again. Like I've written 4 fake relationship romances, and personally I think they are very different and you could never confuse them with each other.
Absolutely. Michelle, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I the same really. I was thinking about sitcoms and just how formulaic and tropey sitcoms can be, but they're so different, aren't they? You could watch 100, 200, 300 different sitcoms. They've all got that 30 minutes and the beats are all in the same place and the ad break, and they follow a kind of format. But a bad sitcom, you wouldn't watch more than one, and a good sitcom, you binge watch it several times, wouldn't you, over and over again, because the characters are good, or the humour's good, or the writing's good. And I think it's the same. It's right. You can write the same book dreadfully, and it can have all the same beats and the stopping off points and the same tropes, and be a great book or a dreadful book. I think it's the writing and the characters, I suppose. Yeah, I was thinking of The Incredible Hulk. Oddly, you're too young to remember The Incredible Hulk. I used to watch that as a kid, and in 5 minutes in, he would always go green and angry. And then after 50 minutes, he would always go green and angry. And the bit in the middle was really boring. But every episode, it was the same. And it's like, I don't know. When I think about tropes a lot, I think about television more than I think about books, because I'm not a very experienced author. So I think there are ways of making it really boring, ways of making it really interesting. You know, if it was always chapter 5 that this happened and chapter 25 they got together, you know, it's like it would be really boring, but it isn't. They're all so different. All the books are so different.
Yeah, very true. And I have watched the Hulk, but probably a repeat. And yeah, it is every like 5 minutes and 50 minutes. We're getting some questions in on Facebook, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm gonna, as you've almost led us into it, Michelle. Do the characters and the idea of the sort of characters come first, or does the trope come first when you're planning your book? Shall we start with the almost planner, Angela?
Thanks for that. For me, it's a mix. It depends where the idea comes from. I get my ideas from so many different places. So sometimes I might think of a character and then I have to think of a situation that I want to put her in, that would suit her character or not suit her, you know, if I want to put her in a sort of tense situation. Sometimes I'll sit there thinking, wouldn't it be funny if 2 women did this? And I suddenly realise that's a trope. And then that's, you know, with hindsight now, I realise what, you know, trope it is. So it depends. I mean, I haven't deliberately, as I said earlier, I haven't deliberately sat down to write enemies to lovers 4 times, but hey, here we are. So yeah, mostly it's the character that comes to me, and I think then of a situation to put her in. And most of my books are, if I think about it now, are like a mashup of 3 or 4 tropes all together. Like my next book is an enemies to lover, workplace, rich girl, poor girl kind of mashup. So yeah.
Are you trying to achieve a bingo on a trope card?
Yeah, I'd get a book with as many as I could, and then I'm going to get more readers because they'll all find something that they like.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a Venn diagram of tropes, and there's Angela right in the middle.
Scatter paintings, you know, and you just splash paint all over the screen. That's what I'm going for, yeah.
I look forward to reading it. Michelle, what about you? What comes first? Is it the idea, like the trope, or the characters that comes first?
I think it's the characters for me. I mean, I'm one of those people that wanted to write for a long time, for several years, and just haven't had time. And then I jacked in my ridiculously busy job and thought I'll just write for a bit. So I had these characters with me for a really long time, some of them, and they just exist, you know. And then I put them in a book, and things happen. And I already know roughly what's going to happen to them and who they are. So it's definitely characters first. I mean, it might not always be like that for me, but I have these pairs of people just still knocking around on my laptop. But in the future, I mean, for me, I like slow burn, angsty. I understand that's the terminology, or you wait a long time for the payoff, and it's kind of angsty, and it's will they, won't they, and that sort of thing. So I understand that that's what I'm writing now in terms of a trope. So but the characters definitely, definitely first.
Jay, how about you? Characters or tropes when you're plotting?
I think for me it's an artificial question, because I always say the characters are the plot, you know, and so it's so intertwined. I mean, basically I start with the idea of one character and their situation might already be the trope. So a lot of times it all comes to me as one big thing. And then, as Angela said, most stories are not just one trope. They are a mix-up of different tropes and other things as well. So it might be that I start out with one character and the main trope, and then as I develop the character, I also realize, oh, there's also an age gap between them. So another trope might come in.
Yeah, absolutely. Robyn, how about you? What comes first, tropes or characters?
That depends for me on the genre I'm writing. So if it's a pure romance, then for me it's the character that comes first. And usually it'll be one character that comes to me. And then as Radcliffe says, if you're going to have an arsonist, you better have a firefighter, because otherwise you're going to have character conflation and your 2 characters are too much the same that it's going to be so boring to read. So for a pure romance, the character comes first, and then I develop them. And then I'll then pick on character B and then figure out how they are similar and how they're completely opposite to the first character. And then from that will come the plot, because how am I going to put these 2 characters together, and therefore what tropes am I going to use to do that? But if I'm doing a different genre, so thriller or adventure, then the plot comes first. and the situation. So if there was this situation, how am I going to make that interesting? Who's going to populate that story? Who's going to drive that story? So then the characters come second, and within the plot, as the characters come into it, then your tropes come into it, for me.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point about other genres, absolutely. I have another question from the group. How do you feel about cheating in books? It seems to be highly frowned upon, says Melissa Therese. So what are our thoughts on cheating within books? Michelle?
I mean, I don't like to see it, you know, in life. I'm really romantic. That's why I read and write romance books. So I don't like to think about it. I've so much invested in David Beckham and Victoria Beckham staying together, and the idea that he cheated once, I just don't even like to think about it. So I don't want to read it. I don't particularly want to write it. I think not between the main characters anyway. I can live with the idea that in the past one's done something they're not particularly proud of, and they've developed and learned and maybe been bruised by it slightly and it's affected the way they are, but I certainly don't want to see it. For me personally, I just find it really hard. I find it very upsetting. I remember in the L Word when Shane went round to Cherry Jaffe's house and they had incredible sex by the pool, just feeling really conflicted about the fact that she was cheating on Carmen, and it just hurt too much. So I don't like it personally.
Jay, how about you? Cheating in books? Have you written cheating in books in
No,
150 novels?
And I never will. I have to agree, like, I'm a big romantic at heart, and I believe in values like loyalty and faithfulness. And I kind of lose respect for characters when they are cheating. If they're no longer happy in their relationship, then get out. And a character that starts the book with cheating on another character, I would not really trust him to be faithful with their new love interest either. So I've read romance novels where it kind of worked, but I wouldn't search them out as a reader.
Good answer. Robyn, how about you? Cheating in books?
I think it goes back to those expectations of what a lesfic romance reader is looking for, and it is not cheating. It's the rainbows, it's the unicorn, it's the roses, it's the romance, it's the dinners and the love and the fireworks and the explosions. It's not, oh, I'm going to do all that with you and then I'm just going to go and shag this woman down the road. They don't want to see that. So it's like Angela was saying about wanting to write more of a love story than a romance, so you don't necessarily have to have the happy ending, so there's a place for that because it is real life, and often, you know, people cheat and then test the waters and see if that's going to happen and if it's actually worth moving from a relationship, or, you know, something just happens and then that splits up a relationship. This is life, but I think for romance readers, they want to get away from real life or elements of real life. And for romance and pure romance, it's just all about that happy ever after. It's about the sparks and the fireworks, and then how are they going to be together? Because you know they're going to be together in the end, and that's the payoff. So there's a place for cheating, but it's not in a romance novel.
Very good. Angela, what do you think?
Well, as someone who has written a book that had some cheating...
I know, I left you to the end.
Thanks for that.
It's all right, anytime, honey.
And it is my worst seller by a mile, because but when I wrote it, I didn't know that was not a thing. I mean, I remember talking to Claire Ashton at an event one day, and everyone always asked her about that infamous book that she wrote that twisted with everybody's mind, which the title escapes me right now. And we both looked at each other and said, what were we thinking when we wrote these books that are popular, you know? But we just wrote what we wanted to write, you know? And it's interesting, I've been contacted by quite a few people about that book. When you look on Amazon, it looks amazing. It's got 20 odd reviews and it's 4.5 stars, yeah? But I've been contacted by people who said, please don't take this the wrong way. It was a really good book, but I can't rate it because it had cheating. But instead of giving me a 1-star review because it had cheating, they've just not reviewed it at all, which is okay, you know. I honestly didn't realise it was a bad thing. I just wanted to write something real that was about real life. And I should point out to anybody who hasn't read it, it's called Miles Apart, by the way. It's not the two MCs cheating on each other. it's one of the MCs is already in an unhappy relationship, and I take Jay's point that if you're unhappy with your relationship, just get out, don't cheat. But her partner had already cheated on her, so there was kind of a whole other dynamic going on when the second cheating happened, if you see what I mean. So I was just trying to write something that was a bit real, based on some people's lives that I knew and how things had evolved. And yeah, you don't do that, it seems.
It's funny though, because I was having a conversation with someone about your book, Angela, and they absolutely loved it because it was a real story and they felt like it really got to the meat of it. But
yeah, and the people who love it and the people who've given it 4.5, 5 stars, whatever, they that's what they like. They like the fact that it's real.
Yeah.
But I also get exactly what Robyn said. This is not what people want in a romance. They just don't want it. And I totally understand that. Mm-hmm. I just had to write that book at the point where I was in my life, with the things that were going on with me. That was the book that came out of me at that time. So yeah.
Well, Carol is running off to buy a copy of Miles Apart, so there you go.
Good old Carol.
Je ne regrette rien, okay?
Okay, so right, back to our questions. So to subvert a trope is to turn it on its head. What do you think of subverted tropes? Have you used them? Do you like them? Are you not sure about, if those of us who've only recently discovered we write tropes, now to start subverting them? Is this too much for us, too soon? We'll start with the expert though. Jay, what do you think about subverted tropes?
Yeah, they can be really fun and turn the story into something really unique. But they can be tricky because a lot of the times readers will buy a book because of the tropes. Usually the blurb, the description of the books that you read at the retailer or the publisher's website will already let you know what tropes are in the book, and then you know what to expect. And you know from your previous reading experience, is this going to be a book that I enjoy or not as a reader? And so if you think the book is one thing, and then the author completely turns this around and twists it so much that all the elements that the reader expected, and that's the reason why they bought the book, is no longer there, that can turn into a really disappointed reader. Let's say we're talking about fake relationship romances, and then suddenly it turned out that the two pretend partners, they are not falling in love with each other. It's not really working for most readers unless you make it clear in the book that this will be happening. So yeah, I think it's a fine line and it can work, but it's all in how you execute it.
Absolutely. Robyn, what do you think about subverting tropes?
Yeah, I think Jay's got it right. It's about execution and expectation. So with writing, there are so many rules and things that people put into books and expectations that if you learn all about them, then you can play with them. And with tropes, you can subvert them. But as Jay said, it's the execution and how you do that. So it's oh, I wasn't expecting that, but it doesn't jar the reader so much that it jars them out of the story. And then worst case scenario, they put that down. You want to just push the boundaries slightly to make them think that little bit extra. So, they might be expecting an enemies to lovers trope, but there's something in there that just twists the knife on that, just a tiny amount, that just makes the reader go, oh, like a little electric shock, like, oh, like that, but not a full-blown like this, and they drop the book and that's it. So it's expectation and execution. So know the expectations of the reader, know the expectations of what you're supposed to put into a book through writing it, and then play.
Yeah. Angela, what do you think about subverted tropes? Do you like them? Do you want to write them? Or?
To be honest, I didn't even know what this term was until first thing this morning when I looked it up on the internet. So don't know. Yeah, I mean, if someone can do it, and completely change my expectations, like Robyn just said, with that little zing, halfway through, then brilliant, bring it on. I have no problem with that. I have no idea if I've ever subverted a trope. As you know, I didn't even know I was writing tropes. So, who knows? I like the sound of it. Now that I've read up all about it, it sounds cool. So maybe I'll have a play. But yeah, no, if someone can do that and completely... I think I'm going one direction and then I go somewhere else. But like Jay said, I don't go somewhere I don't want to go. I go somewhere even more exciting. Then yeah, bring it on.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking with another author. We were considering co-writing a book on a sort of fake romance kind of story, and we were thinking quite often when someone sort of like forced, you know, you're going to have to pretend to be in a relationship with me. Quite often that's the person from a position of power. So we thought to subvert that trope, we could have it being the person who's usually doesn't have the power would be the person who suddenly gets that tiny bit of leverage over the other person and gets to. So we were sort of talking about subverting the trope that way, but it is a fine balancing act, and obviously subverting the trope can be massive, or it can be just as Robyn's little electric shock. So it sort of depends. Michelle, what do you think about subverting the tropes?
I mean, I think like AL, really, I hadn't heard of them until today. I can imagine it could work. I sort of, when I think about it in my head, I think enemies to lovers, subvert that to lovers to enemies. I'm not sure I buy that book. You know, like second chance romance.
I'd read that book. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
I don't know, actually. I can't quite imagine it. So maybe I just don't know enough about it. I'm sure I've read books where there's been a bit of that in there, where I've been a bit surprised by the way it goes. But I haven't thought about it very much, I think, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to your next book with
Try,
some subverted tropes.
Yeah.
So along this line, and you may well have done this to prepare for this panel, have you ever researched tropes to look for new ones? Shall we start with Robyn?
That'll be a nice quick answer is no. I start with either characters or a plot and situation, and then from that tropes will naturally occur. So no, I'm sorry.
It's all right, you don't have to lie. Yes, I spend all day researching tropes, thank you. No, that's fine. Jay, how about you? Have you researched tropes to try to find something? Well, you've written so many books. Are you trying to look for the new next thing?
Not really. Like Robyn, I start with the character, and at that point, either the character already implies the trope, or I then come up with it. But I did research tropes, not to come up with story ideas, but to see how to better describe the stories after I have written them.
Yeah.
Because I think tropes are quite handy as a shorthand to communicate to readers and to your publisher what kind of story is this, and to condense it so that readers can understand, is this something they're looking for or not?
Absolutely. Michelle, how about you? Have you ever researched tropes?
You know, I researched it just for my own awareness. I mean, literally up until about 12 months ago, I didn't know what toast-driven romance was. Ice Queen romance, like all these terms were just really new to me. So I did do a bit of a look in to try and understand it all. Recently, I sort of got quite obsessed about writing a story about a bodyguard, and I think maybe because I watched that Keeley Hawes thing, I'm not sure.
Yeah, same. I did the same.
And then it turned into a driver, and then I was kind of interested if that was a trope, like bodyguard guarding a famous person. So is that a trope? I could write that. And I have written that book actually, about 2/3 of the way through it, but not quite a bodyguard, but nearly. So I got a bit obsessed by that. Lockdown tropes. I feel like that's got to be when I looked at it actually, I didn't look on Wikipedia, but I started to think about books around lockdown, because I imagine that's going to be something people are going to want to write, because it has possibilities, doesn't it? You're locked down together, you're building a writing studio, all sorts of things could happen. And then I realised there are lockdown romances already. They're just not pandemic related, but there's tons of them, and that is a kind of genre or a trope. So it's interesting, it's fascinating for me. To be honest, I'm still learning and still reading and still trying to understand the craft and the tropes. So yeah, I do sometimes look and read, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I do too. I'm constantly interested, because as you said, like about the advertising of your book, Jay, sort of like what have I written there? Is there an easy way to explain it? Because I'm going to use 50 words, and some clever young person on Tumblr is probably using 2 to do exactly the same thing. Angela, how about you? Do you ever research tropes?
No, I haven't until this morning, and then
yeah.
Which I am going to use. I found a website listing 148 tropes in romances, and I was like, saving that bookmark, because actually I read down it, and there were some really funky sounding ones that actually might be fun to play with. So I had no, as you know, I had no idea until the last 12, 24 months what tropes were. But yeah, I mean, like Jay said, I now do the same as her. I look at what I've written and work out what fits it, you know, so that we can advertise it better and people they know what they're getting then. Like I said, next one is a workplace fake romance, rich girl, poor girl mashup. So, you know, it'll get those 3 tropes tagged on it.
Yeah. No, it is very good when you can sort of do a bit of a pick and mix with the different tropes and use that to adequately and quickly describe your book. Okay, we have a question from Facebook from Mark. Slightly off tropes, but you're also keen on characters. We'll go with this. Do you guide the characters or do they guide you? I'm already thinking I know the answers to some of these here. We'll start with Robyn. Do your characters guide you, or are you firmly in control of that?
It's a mixture. I do a character study when I begin to write a book. So I'll figure out who my character is, and then I'll go in depth. And often that's not. Sometimes I use a template, and then other times I'll just write freehand about, you know, who they are, what they've been through, what life's thrown at them, what their education is, what their family background is, all of those things that builds a character and makes us react so uniquely in the same situations. And then once I've got that basis, I launch those characters into the story. And then, you know, follow my little outline, like Jay says, about what's going to happen and plot it out. But then I can be writing and the character will say something and it's coming off my fingertips. And I'm like, oh, you didn't just do that. You did. Oh, well then. And the characters just do have a life of their own once you've established them. But that's the beauty of, and let's go back to what I said earlier, is your characters have to be 3D, living, breathing people. They're not you. They're not somebody you know. Because as you get to write more and more books, you know, you're going to run out of those people if that's what you're doing. But by creating these entities, they do surprise you because it's not what you would say. It's not how you would react in that situation. And the further you get into the story, the more that they can surprise you because they're becoming the character that you wanted them to be. So it's a mix of the two.
Yeah, good answer. Jay, how about you? Do your characters guide you or do you do the guiding?
Also both. As a former psychologist, I think I put a lot of detail into character creation. I also have, like Robyn said, like character profiles that I fill out, like what are their past relationships, their families, what made them who they are today. And if you know a person, a character in such detail, they start to take on a life of their own, and they will surprise you. The book I just finished and that is about to be published, Wrong Number, Right Woman, I had a different ending in mind. But the characters totally surprised me, and it fits. It usually when the characters surprise me, it's much better than anything I envisioned at the beginning, because I got to know them better as I was writing the book. So it's always a mix of both.
Excellent. Angela, how about you?
Yeah, pretty much the same. It's always about starting out with an idea, and I do what Robyn does. Although I don't plan as such, I do have like a little character sketch of my 2 MCs. I only do it for my 2 MCs. I don't necessarily do it for the side characters because they're just not, you know, they're not featuring as much. But yeah, I'll have moments just like you said, Robyn, when I'm typing away and they suddenly and you go, "You what? Where are you going? Come back!" I thought what this thing was. Oh, okay, we're going there. And I love it. I get such a buzz out of that because I love the fact that whole part of my overthinking brain shut down. Yeah. And my completely creative, sunk myself into this story in these characters part, took over and just made my fingers type something completely different. And I love it, absolutely love it. I get such a buzz.
Yeah, that happens to me as well. And sometimes you do start writing and you're like, that's not in the plan. In fact, that's not in your personality. How did that happen? Michelle, how about you? Are you in control of your characters, or are you still
really reassuring to hear everyone say that? Because yeah, that actually, to me, it's alchemy. It's still like chemistry. I don't understand it. I don't understand how you can be writing something and they're fictional characters and they're yours, but yet they do something unexpected. And one of my characters became was a poet, and I was like, where did that come from? I don't even like poetry. I even had to write some poetry for, in the book, which was, I don't know where that came from either, and it was just lovely. And I've never been to a poetry slam, and yet there's this whole scene in a bookstore where they're having a poetry slam, which she's at the centre of, and I just thought it's fascinating the way the process works, if it doesn't sound a bit too precious to say it. But so yeah, that for me has just been joyful to find out that happened. So the characters are there. I don't plan them perhaps as well as a lot of people, but I do write a biography for them, but then suddenly they'll have a really interesting father or something I wasn't expecting. I think what's fascinating about characters is that obsession people have with figuring out who they are and which one you are and which one is your partner, and is that situation that, you know, so I get that a lot. I spend a lot of time telling people none of the characters are me, none of those things happen to me. I don't know where it all came from, because people want to understand it. People that know me, I mean, in my life, they're always trying to guess, so that's kind of funny too. But they are, yeah, of me, but not me.
Yeah. That wears off when you write more than 10 books. People start thinking you've either got multiple personality disorder, and then they avoid you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You don't get those questions when you don't have friends anymore.
I think they kind of hope that they inspired some situation, and when you sort of say no, they stop asking after that.
Yeah, it's funny though, isn't it? Because you kind of want to say to people, do you have an imagination? Because that's where it comes from. Very strange. Okay. Okay, we just have a couple of minutes left, so we're going to just go to one last question, sort of on characters. Sunny Day asks, do you have a favourite place that you like your stories to happen? So, location. Are you locationally based when you write your stories? Angela, shall we start with you?
No, I've lived, as my bio says, I've lived all over the world. I mean, I now live in Germany. I was born in the UK. I've lived in Australia. So I kind of feel like, and I've travelled a lot, you know, around the world. And my first book I set in the UK. My second book I set in Australia. My third one was split between the UK and Canada, because I'd spent a lot of time in Canada. So I kind of, no, I don't have a particular place. I mean, my last couple of books, I've been a mix again of America and the UK. The next one I'm writing is in America. Yes. I think then. So no particular place. Again, that comes to characters. Like, who are the characters, and where, location-wise, do they best fit?
Yeah.
The story going to work better in one country or another.
So in that way, you're viewing your character, so your location as another character, and yeah. Jay, how about you? Do you have a special location you like to write frequently, or do you globetrot like Angela?
Like Angela, but that also leads sometimes to, because I like to connect stories and have supporting characters from one book then later get their own story in their own book. And that, of course, means it has to be set in the same place. For example, the main characters of one book will be best friends with the main character of the next book. So that means that I have several books that are, for example, set in Portland. I have one book that is set in my hometown here in Freiburg. And of course, if you write a celebrity romance and the main character is, let's say, an actress, then maybe she's based in LA or Vancouver. Yeah, so it all depends on the book.
Absolutely. Robyn, how about you?
Yeah, no, I've written books with characters all over the place. The one thing I do with locations is make sure I research it properly. So I like to go there, which has been in the past a great excuse to travel all over the world at the drop of a hat.
Do you remember the old days?
Oh God, yeah. Vegas and then Berlin and blah blah blah. But you know, that's a thing of the past, it seems. But obviously Google Earth is there. You can drop yourself into the street that you're doing. So with Music City Dreamers, I did that. I wasn't able to go to Nashville, so I sat in a little Google squishy thing and looked around and was able to do it that way. So I think so I don't use a specific location. It comes with whatever's happening in the story with the plot, or from the character. If it's a pure romance, it's kind of, where are they from and why are they from that place, and where are they located, why are they located where they are now. But But I think when you do decide on a location, to make sure you research it properly, as thoroughly as possible. Speak to people that have been there. Do your Google Earthy business. Go there if you can, because to me, location can often be like I think you said, Amanda, another character. In Uncharted, a great big portion of the book was set in the Brazilian rainforest. And I spent a lot of time making sure the setting in that didn't disappear, so that you were 3/4 or halfway through the book and it could have been anywhere. It didn't matter because you were so taken up with the journey. It was about making the location part of that feeling, so you knew all the time that that's where you were.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. Michelle, how about you in your short writing career?
I'm a city girl, so I sort of tend to. I've written 3 books. They've all been in cities. I left London after 25 years recently, a couple of years ago, and I think I missed London. So a couple of my books have been in London, and London is very much a character in those books. It's kind of interesting, like an American in London, with a Londoner showing an American London, and it's a way, I think, for me to just be joyful about London, because I miss it quite a bit. I set the book that's coming out in December is set in Miami, the girl band kind of book, a place I've never been. So I mean, Twitter's enormously helpful. There's people on Twitter that have lived everywhere that will give you any kind of advice you ask them. So I got lots of advice about Cuban food, and which were the best croquetas, and which was the best place to have high-end real estate in Miami, which beaches. So people can help you. You can do research, Google Earth. So yeah, it's interesting to get to know new places. I'm not a country girl. Flies, grass, bugs. So I don't think I'll ever write a book in that kind of setting. Certainly not a rainforest. So I'm already worried about mosquito bugs.
See, you and me are going to get on so well. I mean, yeah, cities all the way. My wife is constantly like, let's go to nature, and I'm like, well, you enjoy that. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun to sort of create that sort of. I think the only depressing part about location and countries and things like that is one of your characters being really rich, and then you do the research on where they be living or the yacht they own or whatever, and that can be quite depressing. Yeah. Thank you all so much. It's been a fascinating chat. We've had loads of wonderful comments in the Facebook chat. Thank you for giving up your time. So stay tuned, everyone. We'll be talking about self-publishing in about half an hour with Natalie.